Sitting in the hospital with your baby boy, about to debate circumcision.
No, this is a blatant attempt at pathos, but hey, whatever works, right? Can you hear the TV in the background?
I can't.
No, it's quite all right. You're good.
Okay, so it's not coming up on the feed.
Very little. I hardly hear it. No, let your wife watch TV. We're good.
Okay, all right. Fair enough. So I'm the pro, so I'll start out. So first off, thank you for taking the debate, Lee. First time in a proper debate I call out. Not the first time on the stream, but the first time taking an actual disagreement debate. So I'm really excited to have you here. Really glad that you decided to do this, and I hope you enjoy yourself. So the topic of tonight's debate is should children get circumcised? So in my opinion, no. It is a not something that one ought to do, and I'm going to lay out my contentions as follows. So contention 1, bodily autonomy, when reasonably able, should be respected, even in children. Contention 2, circumcision is a medically unnecessary elective procedure. Contention 3, with proper hygiene, the medical benefits from circumcision are really not that substantial, as opposed to not being circumcised. Contention 4, the foreskin serves a function. And my last contention, when looked at from a cost-benefit perspective, the procedure is not worth it. So I'm going to go ahead and pass it to you.
All right. Okay. So we make my thoughts are, of course, we should circumcise our children. Kind of as you discussed, that there are some health benefits to doing it, and you're stating that there's very little health benefits to doing circumcision. One of the easiest benefits, it does make it easy to wash beneath the foreskin. There's also studies do show that there is a decreased risk of urinary tract infections. However, in males, it is already low, but with circumcision, it decreases the risk even lower. It also reduces the risk of sexually transmitted disease by 50%. And this is according to Everyday Health. The CDC actually supports circumcision for this reason alone. It also decreases the risk for penile and prostate cancer. Penile cancer is rare already. However, that's another decrease. So when you say it's an elective, yes, a lot of these studies do say that they don't come out and say that, yes, you need to do this, that this needs to be universal. However, they do support it, and that it needs to be a family decision. And you bring up the cost. If you take the cost of cancer, the cost of UTIs, the cost of other sexually transmitted diseases, that $150 to $400, if you do it while they're a baby, is nothing to the thousands of dollars per person that somebody's going to pay for the rest of their life if they get one of those things. There's also during childbirth, there's something that's called, I don't know how to say it, but phimosis. It usually happens at birth, and what it is, it's a tight foreskin that can't be drawn back from the head, and this is extremely painful when the male has erections. So with that said, even though with that being said, when they get older, they might need this procedure, and there's a lot more issues with those procedures at a later age than going ahead and getting it done when the baby doesn't even know it. So I'll pass it back to you.
Sure. So, what was the name of the disease you mentioned?
Phimosis,
Yeah.
Phimosis.
Do you have the rate of how much that occurs?
I do not. I'm sorry.
Okay, no worries. Um, so I do not have the rate in front of me either. Um, I'm so this is speculation, obviously, because I don't have a source, but I'd be willing to wager that the rate is very low, just because if it was higher, well, then it would might be considered a medically necessary procedure. So, would you mind googling that for me
No,
while I
that's exactly what I'm doing now.
okay, sure, thank you. All right, so just unpacking what you said here. So, ease of cleaning it. So, um, up to the age about 8 or 9, you actually don't have to clean the penis any differently in an uncircumcised baby as you would a circumcised baby. The foreskin is actually attached to the head of the penis, and you don't need to retract. You need to wipe off the outside just as you would um, with a circumcised penis. Now, before puberty, the foreskin will retract naturally. Now, at this point, you do have to do something else that a circumcised person would not have to do. But it takes about, I don't know, 5 seconds to pull back that foreskin um, and just to wash it off the same way that you would any other part of your body. You don't even really need to use soap from some of the sources I've looked at. Literally just water. To remove the sweat, to remove the dirt, the potential. I don't even really like using this word because it's so gross sounding to me. To remove the potential for schmegma. But yeah, it's a funny word. But um, to me, that unto itself is not necessarily justification for circumcision. We don't remove our teeth because it's a pain in the butt to brush them. We take a minute or 2 minutes out of the day to brush our teeth. Now, I'm going to, so I laid out my contentions. I'm go ahead and talk about one before I pass it back to you. So I wanted to bring up the function of the foreskin because the foreskin actually does serve a purpose. Um, so first off, having foreskin creates the appearance of a visually larger penis. In fact, it does create a larger penis. There's more tissue there. You you got more meat. Take that as you will, but hey, it makes for a bigger dick. Uh, so the foreskin actually protects the glands, which is area of tissue at the end of the head of the penis. Um, so there's an inner ring of clustered nerve cells in the foreskin that actually is the highest concentration of nerve cells in the male sex organ. So it is actually the most pleasurable part of the penis for sex or for masturbation in a man. Removing that takes away a huge androgynous zone, a huge zone of pleasure in the man. Um, so you brought up UTIs. Now there are actually some infections that the foreskin can prevent. Um, Obviously, if you have foreskin, you have no risk of post-surgical infection. Now, granted, really, really bad, like disfiguring repercussions of surgery are rare, especially in the United States. They are rare, but they do happen. And there are children that have lost their penis um, because of getting circumcised, which is obviously terrible, incomprehensibly so. The rate's about 1 in a million. But hey, that possibility is still there. It's also worth pointing out that unlike say an appendix, for example, evolution has put this foreskin there. All nearly, as far as I can tell, all animals that have an exterior penis have some sort of foreskin or some sort of protective tissue. So, from an evolutionary standpoint, natural selection says or dictates that should be there. And finally, on this topic of the function of the foreskin, I wanted to kind of compare it to the clitoris, to a woman. Now, I'm not saying that you're arguing for female circumcision. I know the topic of the debate is children should not be circumcised. I assume you ceded that women should not be.
Yeah.
Um,
That's horrible.
Yeah. And I would argue that it's just as bad for a man for the same sort of reasons. But so in the womb, in the early periods of gestation, all embryos are actually female, right? You start as a female, and then the males develop their sexual organs. The clitoral sheath is actually the same tissue that becomes the foreskin, the clitoris becoming the penis. You get where I'm saying with that? Am I being clear?
I understand that.
Okay. All right. So I'm gonna go ahead and pass back to you.
Okay, so going back to the phimosis, the only thing I've been able to find is from which it's not going to be a reliable source because it's about circumcision. But circinfo.net states that it's a case of 10%. And however, if you have that disease by the age of 3, it should be gone. If it's not, then it's a problem. So that's something that you have. I'm not sure the reliability of circinfo.net is. However, this is what I have found. Going on to the cleaning, yes, you're right. We don't take out our teeth because it is a hassle to clean. However, that little bit of easiness does make it better. For example, when you have a cavity, we don't leave the cavity there. We go through and we take out the cavity and we replace it with something else. So going back there, if you take out an organ, also the appendix, going to the appendix, when it starts bothering, we don't just go in and cut it. When we have an issue, we go ahead and do it. However, we're not doing that to babies. And kind of moving back through, there have been several. I'm gonna go to your the functions. I've never heard that that makes your penis larger having the foreskin. That is a new one on me. The protecting of the glands, that is not something that I've researched. However, the pleasurability, there's actually research on pleasurability in nations where, I'm coming from memory, probably have it in one of my tabs. Coming from memory, they've actually taken men who have been who have not been circumcised and that have wanted to be circumcised. So they circumcised them, and they let them go do their thing for several years. And then they came back and they said, "How was your sexually? Were you more did you feel more pleasure or did you not?" And in many of the cases, let's see if I can actually find it real quick in my and in many of the cases they actually felt more pleasure being circumcised than not. I'll have to find that later. But I've also found that in those same countries they use circumcision to help fight sexually transmitted diseases. Men in those other countries, in heterosexual males. All right, this is from the Academy of Pediatrics. This is a direct quote. It has shifted its stance on infant male circumcision, saying that new research, including studies in Africa, suggesting that the procedure may protect heterosexual men against HIV, indicating that the health benefits outweigh the actual risks. It also reduces the risk of cervical cancer in female sexual partners, and this is according to WebMD. So there are major benefits, cancer benefits to men and women, as well as the health benefits of removing the foreskin. There's many health benefits. When you have a UTI, everything swells up and it makes it hard to pee. It's extremely painful to pee. And if we can stop that early on, when the child doesn't have to think, okay, it's hard for me to pee. What's the reason? And the doctor says, oh, well, we got to cut off part of your penis. The child is going to be traumatized, and they might even come back and blame me. It's like, well, heck, all boys get circumcised. Why did you not circumcise me? Now I'm having to go through this. Even though the chances of that happening are low, why do you want to put that on somebody? And also, I think we should go and look at why circumcision is still around. The story that I read while researching circumcision, it came from the desert, that sand would get caught up into those glands and actually cut, kind of what you were saying about protecting the glands of the penis, that the sand would get inside those glands, inside the foreskin, and would end up cutting up. Now, those issues, of course, where we are not an issue, but it brings up a good point that it adds to cleanliness. It makes it easier to clean, and it prevents an effect, something major happening later. I felt like I was all over the place on that one, but I'll pass it back to you. How about that?
Yeah, hey, no worries. I picked up what you were laying down. So going back to your first point, comparing circumcision to a cavity. So a cavity has no discernible medical benefits, and a cavity is actually it's a disease. It's an affliction. Foreskin's not a disease. Foreskin's part of your body that, as per evolution, should be there. So I think that's kind of a disanalogy there. Now, you read part of the American Association of Pediatrics stance on circumcision, but I don't think you read it all.
I I stated earlier in the debate that they don't recommend it universally. They're like, we don't have the say now to say yes, every single male needs to do this. They still leave it up to the parents, and I did say that kind of in the beginning of our debate.
So in the in the view of the American Association of Pediatrics, it is not worth recommending universally or
Correct.
routinely. Now, if I can put a percentage on that, and again, this is just their view, and I would actually argue, as I do in my contentions, that some of their premises are flawed. The benefit versus the cost in pure empirical numbers is about I would say 51% pro circumcision, 49% anti-circumcision, or they don't feel strongly enough to actually recommend this universally. Now, it's important when they look at this, all they look at is what is empirically measurable. So according to medical studies, so according to what is empirically measurable, empiricism does not take into account bodily autonomy. It does not take into account pleasure. You can't quantify pleasure. I'll talk about your study in a little bit, but and so and yeah. So anyway, only what is quantifiable. Now, just talking about your study. First off, I would say that inherently polling is the least reliable way to gather information, right? I mean, just in terms of the philosophy of science, polling has shown to create for not really great data. So you have one poll, and I'd have to look at the methodology to know for sure, reporting that that men feel more pleasure after circumcision To me, that's not super reliable. Now, what we can understand is that we derive pleasure in the context of sex from touch. Uh, we experience touch through nerve endings. Um, the foreskin has a greater concentration of nerve endings. It increases the surface area of what is actually touchable or feelable. Ergo, it would increase pleasurability. Um, and you see that in other androgynous zones as well. Um, High rates of concentrated nerves tend to be areas that people like stimulated. For example, the clitoris in a woman, or the quote unquote G spot. Now, going back to your um, point about UTIs. Now, um, UTIs, it's only a concern when hygiene is not properly accounted for. So you talked about if we can stop UTIs, we should. Well, yeah, we can stop UTIs, and we can stop UTIs or greatly reduce them without the negative benefits of circumcision simply by taking 5 seconds to retract the foreskin to clean it. It's not difficult to do. Um, just a personal anecdote. So I'm a veteran, and I've spent time overseas. I've spent time in Afghanistan, and I've lived in austere environments for great lengths of time, upwards of a month, where I didn't have access to running water. I mean, Afghanistan, just in terms of infrastructure, is probably one of the worst places that you can be. Now, we kept ourselves as clean as we could. Granted, we had the resources of the army, so we had baby wipes and access to fresh water through airdrops and stuff. But my point is, even in a very austere environment, you can find a way to keep clean if you make that effort. Now, you talked about how foreskin came about or came to be common. It's also worth pointing out that outside of the United States, the rate of circumcision is very, very low, even in other industrialized nations. So, give me a minute while I find my source here.
Well, kind of while you're finding your source, I guess I'll talk about that rate. You're right. The rate of circumcision is low in other developing countries. However, it is also used, like for example, in Uganda, it is highly recommended for circumcision to help slow the spread of HIV and AIDS, and that is one of the reasons why they do it and why they encourage it. Uh, and that study involved over 1,200 HIV negative heterosexual sexual couples living in Uganda. And this is from WebMD in 2011. But I think you found your source, so I'll let you talk.
Sure. Yeah. So the highest rate of circumcision is actually in African nations, West African nations, and South African nations, having about an 80% or higher prevalence of circumcision. So you talk about how it's used to prevent HIV. Well, it's not doing a very good job because Africa still has a pretty huge problem with HIV. It's about 60% rate of prevalence in the United States and less than 20% in pretty much the rest of the world, besides Australia. But all of South America, all of Europe, it's actually less than 20% prevalence. Um, and I mean, these are countries that don't have a, uh, a high problem with HIV. Um, so to me, that's somewhat of a weak line of reasoning. Uh, the best way to prevent HIV, and what I'm going to be impressing upon my son, is you need to protect yourself by using latex condoms. Um, we live in a wealthy nation, and even in poor nations, latex condoms are readily available and they are cheap. Um, But I'll go ahead and pass it back to you with that one.
I think you bring up some fantastic points. However, I still feel that if we can reduce the risk, HIV isn't one of those things that, okay, you get it, we give you some pills and it's gone forever. It's not the flu. It's not it's not like a bacterial infection we can get rid of right there. It is a serious disease that children don't necessarily understand. They don't understand forever. And every day we make decisions for our children that can be life or death, or it might be, or it's just choices. It's just choices that we make for our children. Because I know that was one of your contingencies, choices that the child doesn't have a choice in whether his foreskin is removed or not. That's a choice that we are making as a parent. You as a parent are making that choice of, I'm not going to do it. I have these reasons, and that's great for you. When I have when I have a son, I'm going to do it because I believe in doing everything I can as a parent to make sure that I give my child the tools necessary for a healthy living life. Because I would hate for him to get older. Just the thought of him getting older and something happening, getting the phimosis later on in life, or getting some sort of cancer later in life, or getting an STI later in life, that I might have been able to prevent that through cutting the foreskin, which he wouldn't have remembered to begin with. And I also think that with us having one of the best some of the best medical facilities in the world, doing the best that we can to reduce any sort of risk of cancers, UTIs. That's something that we should do. It's somewhat like vaccinating our children. We do it because we don't want these diseases to come back. It's now cutting the penis is a little bit more, or a lot more. I'll give you that. It's a lot more. There's a lot more risk involved. However, the risk is still hardly anything. You brought up that children do die. However, the children that die, it's found, aren't they die when it's not done in a hospital, and and it was done essentially at home, or during a ritual. The actual rate, if it's done in a hospital, is so low. I think I read somewhere. I'll have to find it. It's it's one in several million. It might happen once or twice a year, as long as it's done in a hospital. Now, if you're doing it at home, or it's done in a sanitary way, then yes, there is going to be there is going to be a death, and there is going to be a infection. However, if you do it in a safe way, those risks are slim to none. And I believe that that one risk at the beginning of your child's life, it takes away it helps take away the other risks that I've already mentioned, such as the UTIs, the STIs, the cancers for men and women. Going back, having the foreskin cut reduces cervical cancer for women who are sexual partners of men who have circumcised penises. So yes, and you also talked about evolution, how evolution hasn't gotten rid of the foreskin. Evolution also hasn't gotten rid of other things that we don't necessarily need, like the appendix. The appendix has gotten smaller. However, it's not a valuable tool to us. We also, men have, no, that's not a good argument, because I forgot why men have nipples. I was going to bring up men having nipples, but they make those during in the womb, when they going back when they are female. And I don't have any other body parts that I can think of right now. But anyway, I'll pass it back on to you, where we can sum up. Or
Yeah. So no, I think we. How much time we have left? 15 minutes. You're saying should we go to like our final
I mean,
statement?
I mean, I mean that's kind of what I did is the final statement. I mean, we've
Okay.
talked about the cleanliness. We've talked about
Yeah.
the risks involved.
Yeah. No, no. I mean, we can keep going, and
No, absolutely. Go ahead.
it never hurts to recap at the end. So you should.
Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. So I was curious about the cervical cancer, the reduction in cervical cancer amongst women with that sleep with as opposed to circumcised as opposed to uncircumcised. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Um, let me find that source. Um,
Okay, and I'll just throw up another line of reasoning here. So you talked about how um, when done in a proper medical facility, the the rate of circumcision risk goes dramatically down, and I think that's a fair point. And it kind of sounds like what you're saying is when done with proper hygiene and done in such a way as to take care of the penis, the rates become negligible. Was that is that about summing up your argument in that
uh,
line of reasoning?
yes, yes.
Yeah, which is the exact same point that I bring up when properly maintained, when properly taken care of, the actual the rates of penile cancer, the rates of UTI is dramatically lower, comparable to circumcised men. Um, and it does take 5 seconds in the shower. You don't even have to shower every day. You can shower once a week, or even if you don't feel like taking a shower, just take a little wet rag and just wiping away that sweat, wiping away that potential buildup. And that's all that's required to properly maintain that area. Did you find your source, or are you still looking?
No, I know. I have it pulled up. This is
Yeah.
from Web MD. Th- I guess I'll just kind of let's see. Let's see if I can find. All right, so I'll read kind of like the paragraphs that refer to the cervical cancer, if that's okay. And I can link this also at the end. Half of the men, the study involved more than 1,200 HIV negative heterosexual couples living in Uganda, where circumcision of male adults is increasingly encouraged as a means of slowing the spread of HIV and AIDS. Half of the men received the surgical procedure at enrollment, and the other half were scheduled for circumcision after their participation in the trial ended. 2 years later, the female partners of the men who remain uncircumcised were more likely than the partners of the circumcised men to be infected with the HPV virus, types most often associated with cervical cancer. In earlier trials, Johns Hopkins University researcher Aaron A.R. Tobin, medical doctor, PhD, and colleagues showed that male circumcision reduces HIV infections, HPV in men, and genital herpes. The new study appears online Friday in the Lancet.
Okay, so it's related to HPV infections, is what was I gathered. So that makes sense. So I know we kind of went over this point, but um, sorry. Sorry. So the first choice should always be latex condoms. They're cheap. They're easy to come by in the United States and in most of the world. Um, I guess if we turned into like some kind of Mad Max scenario, we all reverted to a state of nature. Maybe then the STI argument might be a little bit more compelling to me, but I don't really have any reason to believe that we're going into anarchy anytime soon, other than the fact that Donald Trump's our president. I don't know that pretty good indication. But I did want to talk about the pain factor, right? So as a principle, we try to reduce the pain in ourselves and in our children. My own ethical code, hedonistic utilitarianism, that actually is how the morality or the ethics of an action is measured, is by the reduction of pain and the increase of pleasure. And I want to talk a little bit about how the procedure actually happens. So it can be done by a pediatrician, or it's not even done necessarily by a surgeon, but the anesthetics that's applied, it's a local anesthetic. So think what you get when you get like a tooth drilled, right? When you get a cavity. It's a local anesthetic, and there is no doubt that this is painful. You can't necessarily quantify pain, but if you listen to the screams of the baby when it happens, it is undoubtedly painful. Um, it makes the baby very distressed, and it actually that stress in that baby. He's not going to sleep as well. Obviously, he's in pain. It's going to stress you out as a parent, right? Because you're dealing with this aggravating scream of a need that you can't meet. So the baby cries because he's hungry, because he's wet. You can meet that need. The baby cries because he's in genuine pain that you can't take away. That's something completely different. Now, take if the mother chooses to breastfeed. If the baby is inconsolable, um, he's not going to feed. Um, if the baby doesn't feed, there goes the mother's milk supply, right? And if the circumcision usually happens 1 to 2 days after the baby's born, he's still drinking colostrum at that point, which is the most nutrient dense milk that you will get from the mother, and you could completely miss out on that extremely beneficial milk. Even if you get to breastfeed at all, because there's a possibility that he never latches. Because breastfeeding is difficult. And when you throw in this elective procedure that greatly distresses the baby, that increases the odds that doesn't happen, which could be devastating for terms of the psyche of the mother, um, in terms of regret, in terms of self-worth, that feeling that she's not good enough, she can't feed her baby. Well, it's not that she can't feed her baby. The baby's distressed. The baby's in pain because of this elective procedure. I just wanted to throw that contention out there. Kind of went along with my last contention in terms of cost benefit analysis and not being worth it. Let's see what time we got left. So we got six. So
650.
Maybe I'll take 3.5.
Yeah, we can do that. But I kind of wanted to ask you a question. And then I forgot the question. Would you when you were growing up, brushing your teeth, the simplest basic need, did you do that every single day religiously?
Oh no, of course not.
No. How long do you think that you went without brushing your teeth?
Myself, I don't think that I went more than. I would say that probably not more than 1 day. I don't think that I necessarily strung multiple days together. I might
So
be
you
wrong.
don't think that?
My mom.
Okay. Well, when I was growing up, this is probably disgusting, but I would go a week and a half. I didn't like brushing my teeth. I hated that 2 or 3 minutes. I felt was like eternity, and I don't think that you can trust a kid to make sure to clean down there. And I know that's going to distress him when he's older and he's able to comprehend, oh, my mom and dad are cleaning my foreskin for me down there because they got to check to make sure I'm cleaning it properly or I'm showing properly. So that's a minute point. Yes, I know, but it's you really trust your kids to take care of themselves until they get older. Because once they get older, if you don't want to brush your teeth, you don't have to brush your teeth. So that's kind of a point that I wanted to put out there. but I guess to end it, we discussed we did discuss the benefits and whether the risk of the circumcision is worth it, and we also discussed if the actual uh, reducing the risk of UTIs and other diseases is worth the cutting of the penis. Um, we already know that penile cancer is rare. However, circumcision does still reduce penile cancer as well as prostate cancer. We still know that we can reduce the risk of sexual transmitted diseases by 50% just by circumcising the penis. And we also know that we can reduce the risk of UTIs by circumcising the penis and not having an issue later on in life. We just have to decide as people and as family and parents if those risks of the child dying, the child can die by having the foreskin removed, or the child can have the penis removed because there was an issue in that uh, procedure. But we have to decide as parents, are those risks worth it to possibly prevent the risk that I described earlier? Or do we need to let our child make that decision when he's older and possibly hate it? And possibly hate us that he wants to get it done. And you got about 3 minutes now, so I'll let you finish up.
No worries. So, just going over my contentions one more time. So, bodily autonomy should be respected. So, if there's a question, if it's 50-50, gosh, even if it's 40-60, I believe that is best given to an individual to make his own choice, because he's still his own person. And it's up to him to decide whether he wants to make that journey, once he reaches an age of reason. The fact that it is a medically unnecessary elective procedure. So Medicare and Medicaid don't even cover circumcision these days, because it is seen as something that's not necessary. And then with proper hygiene, the medical benefits are negligible. So everything that you brought up, with the exception of pyrosis, or the painful erections, you can reduce that as long as you take care of yourself. And
no, that's actually a medical problem you can't fix. It's just
yeah. I said with the
okay,
exception.
Yeah. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no worries. But the HIV, the UTI, that can all be reduced to levels of a circumcised person with proper care. And you're right, though. As the parent, it is your burden to make sure that child is taking care of themselves. And it might take a little bit of badgering, and it might take a little bit of nagging, and you might have to pull your son aside, and you might have to make him retract his foreskin to make sure that it's clean. And hey, that's not comfortable, but that is in the best interest of the child in terms of reducing the medical risks. And honestly, if you're not ready for gross things, you probably have no business being a parent, because I'll tell you, it's full of gross things. So the foreskin serves a function. It increases sexual pleasure. It protects, or is evolved to protect the glands. It's not gland. Some people might get confused. It's not glands, GLANDS, but glands, which is a specific area on the tip of the penis. And then finally, when you look at, and just in terms of a purely economic perspective, cost versus benefit, the pain of the child, the fact that we can go about reducing STI, reducing infection in a non-intrusive way, a way that doesn't involve taking off a piece of flesh. The effects are negligible. But hey, I wanted to say, Lee, I hope you enjoyed yourself. I thought you did a really great job. I look forward to seeing more of your debates and going head to head with you again. So Great job, and thanks for taking this.
Hey, absolutely. You have a great night. Okay.
Yeah, you as well.